Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of White Plains program. White Plains, who are we planning for? Certainly an interesting topic on Earth Day. I'm Stephen Cohen. I am the president of the League of Women Voters of White Plains, and I welcome you all. For those of you unfamiliar with the League, we are a 100-year-old volunteer organization whose mission is to promote voting, protect voting rights, and to encourage the informed and active participation of all Americans in government. The League takes no position on candidates for public office or on political parties. Membership in the League is open to all persons 16 years of age and older, regardless of citizenship. Member volunteers do all of the League's work. We encourage you to join our League or make a contribution, which you may do by going to our website, lwvwp.org. So a few pieces of business before we begin. I'll ask that all of you mute your microphones during the course of the meeting. And also, if possible, please turn off your video as well. This will allow you all to see the folks who are really the panelists. If you wish to ask a question, we took questions ahead of time, but if you wish to ask a question, please use the chat feature of Zoom. And the questions that were submitted prior to the program and the questions you asked, we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. This evening's program is being recorded and will be available within the next few days on YouTube. We're not able to offer simultaneous translation of this program tonight into other languages, but the version on YouTube will offer a transcription option so that you may view the video in the language of your choice. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for this roundtable discussion, Ms. Jody Cass-Tracton. Jody is a new member of the League of Women Voters of White Plains. She moved to White Plains with her husband, Mark Tracton, 5 years ago. Jody spent 25 years with Time Warner, previously Time Inc., as the Assistant Corporate Secretary. Please welcome Jody Cass-Tracton. Jody?
Yes. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being with us this evening. I am Jody Cass-Tracton, and I'll be your moderator for the evening. Let me begin by introducing our speakers to you. First, Mary Cavallero. Mary's lived in White Plains since 1982 and is a longtime member of the League, appointed to the White Plains Planning Board in 1989 and became the chair in 1993. During that time, she reviewed numerous subdivisions, site plans, and zoning amendments for various projects and co-chaired the comprehensive plan review. Next is Chris Gomez. He has served as Commissioner of Planning for the City of White Plains for the past 6 years. During his tenure, the city has embarked on a multitude of exciting planning initiatives, among them a multi-year community visioning process to reimagine the downtown transit district and the adoption of a new citywide affordable rental housing ordinance. Prior to his appointment in 2015, Chris served as the Director of Planning and Development in the village of Port Chester. And David Schiff, his 47-year career as a city planner, David worked both as a municipal partner and as a consultant to public agencies, private developers, and nonprofits. He is a past chair of the Urban Land Institute's Westchester Fairfield chapter and is currently the chair of the White Plains Board of Ethics. Our goal tonight is forward-looking, focusing on the issues that residents of White Plains will be thinking about prior to the upcoming elections for City Council and Mayor in the fall. We will begin with a conversation between the panelists, followed by some questions that have already been sent to us from attendees. And if we have time, we will take questions from the audience. So let's start with the planning process. Does the city have a vision for planning and development? And how does that vision drive what actually happens in White Plains development?
Well, I guess I'll start with that. Again, before I answer the question, I do want to thank the League for hosting this and of course for this wonderful turnout. I'm kind of scrolling through the many boxes. I think we have about 85 to 100 people on the call, many of whom I know, and I know we're intimately involved in community here in White Plains. So with that, I'm really happy to take part and thanks for the invite. So again, Chris Gomez, I'm the current planning commissioner for the city. Yeah, the city absolutely has a vision. I can say that unequivocally. And I might add, it's more than just the existing comprehensive plan, right? So the city has an existing plan that many folks on this call were intimately involved with adopting back in 1997 and then updating in 2006 and even in 2012 with some small amendments. So yes, that document is still the guiding vision land use document of the city. But I might add, what's always important to add when we talk about the comprehensive plan and plans in general is that the city has many other documents that guide land use decision making. Anything from the consolidated plan for the allocation of CDBG, Community Development Block Grant funds from the federal government, to the recent Transit District Strategic Plan, to any of the open space plans and neighborhood plans that we have here in the city's planning office. So yes, we do have a vision. I'll start right off the bat. I know there's gonna be a lot of questions about the update to the comprehensive plan. I know the mayor and common council have committed, and you've probably all heard, the city will be embarking in the coming 30 to 60 days on the first phase of this update. The way I've envisioned it, it's going to be a 4 to 5 month process, which is really going to do 2 or 3 things. One is evaluate these numerous plans, including the existing comprehensive plan, which has a lot of good bones, as I like to say, a lot of good vision, and really do a literature review, if you will, of what's on the books for the city. The second thing is sorely needed, and that is to update a lot of the demographic information and what's changed from a trend perspective. And the third thing really, and most importantly for me as a commissioner here with the city, is to develop a really good outline of the type of update and new plan we want to create. I have had the benefit of serving multiple communities in Westchester County and in New York City, and I've been involved with multiple planning processes. And I can tell you unequivocally that without a strong vision statement in this first phase and a well thought out roadmap, if you will, the city, we can certainly get mired in a years long process like a lot of our neighboring communities. So my goal is to make sure this first phase both hears from the community, identifies, a clear vision. And lastly, we include the entire community in the hard to reach areas. I know it's always a challenge, but with the Transit District Strategic Plan, the city made great strides 2 to 3 years ago to really reach into areas that we hadn't heard from at least as much as other neighborhoods in the city. So I like to say we're all one city. We have a strong neighborhood associations all over the city. And I have the benefit of seeing all of them. And I want to make sure I tell everybody up front that this process will be incredibly inclusive, and we're going to use social media and the like to plan for the future. So yes, long-winded answer, but we certainly have a plan, and it's not just the comp plan. We have plenty of other documents that we use to guide us.
I wanted to ask, what do you think the city would look like in 5 to 10 years? And along with that, can you tell us how big the city is and how our population breaks down by age or other measures for all 3 of you?
I came prepared. I can certainly speak, but if other people, I'll just take the first one there. So, as everybody knows, the city and everybody, I'm sure everybody responded to the 2020 census, the decennial census, which is exciting. In the coming months, we'll be getting the results of such. And the hope is that we'll reflect the growth that we've seen over the previous decade. Clearly, COVID and the pandemic has impacted how we collected data as a region. But the hope is, again, that those numbers are only going to go up. So depending on what data source you're using, The population of White Plains currently is about at 58,404 people. There's other data sources that are in and around that number based on surveys, the American Community Survey and the like. So without getting into the real weeds, using that number, the city's 58,400 people break down from a race and ethnicity perspective as follows. So currently, we're 45.1% white, 11.9% African-American, 7.7% Asian, and 1.9% other race. Of course, the question on the census asks whether you're Hispanic or Latino as well, and that is 33.2% of the population. And what's important here are not just the numbers, it's that these numbers completely bear out what we all know, and that is White Plains is an incredibly diverse community. By way of comparison, as I said, 33% Latino, Westchester County's 24%. New York State as a whole is a little over 18%. So we definitely are more diverse than both the county and the state as a whole. And as you know, I think we derive a lot of strength in sort of our economic and socioeconomic diversity here. One other thing I'll add is we've seen from 2000 to 2010, we don't have the 2020 data yet, but comparing decennial census and that decade, we saw a significant increase of nearly 36% in the Hispanic population, and slight decreases in both the white and African-American of 3 to 4% respectively. The one other thing I'll point out, I can go on forever, with data that we use to drive the planning and land use process. One thing that really sticks out is the percentage of households in White Plains that speak a language other than English at home. And that is incredibly high for a city of our size, or not even our size, just incredibly high nationally. That number comes in at 43.4%. Westchester's 33, New York State's 30. So that, again, it's not just Spanish, it's Creole, it's many other languages in the city. So a lot of diversity, a lot to be proud of, high educational attainment. It's no wonder we're sort of winning in the development race in the region. People want to be here.
We had questions, so.
Jody?
Yes, David.
Hi, I'm the other part of your question about what things are going to look like in White Plains in 5 years. I'm going to sort of punt on that and give a little context for people to think about.
Wonderful.
Because it made me think when you raised the question to us, what has changed in the 40 some odd years that I've been here and some of the major changes that we've all seen. Certainly the development in and around the downtown, primarily residential, most recently multifamily residential, is I think the thing that most people are most cognizant of and will look at. We've also gone through tremendous changes in the retail market and the retail part of our land use. We moved here, Mamaroneck Avenue was the main shopping area. The Galleria was just under construction, and of course, is now being talk of that being redeveloped. The Westchester Mall did not exist yet. We had some freestanding retail department stores. So that has all changed. And of course, now with the impact of e-commerce, even more so now during the pandemic, we don't know where those things are headed. We've also went through in that 40-year period the growth of office development in the downtown and along 287, and even in the areas right around White Plains, outside our borders. And in recent years, a lot of those properties have begun to be converted, either expanded to multiple use, converted to residential, hotel, Wegmans, et cetera, et cetera. So there have been a lot of major important shifts in the major land uses here, and a lot of other smaller ones we can get into later on as well.
Mary, anything on
Well,
that
I just
question?
want to add to the first question that I think a lot of people who aren't involved, in the nitty gritty of White Plains might not know what even a comprehensive plan is. Now, the name kind of explains that it's comprehensive, but it's not something that's a dead document. It doesn't sit on the shelf. It's meant to be used every time a developer comes into the city. One of the requirements of whatever the approving agency is, whether it be the Common Council or the Planning Board, is to find that this, whatever the plan is, has to agree with the findings in the comprehensive plan, has to fit. So that's something that's important for people to understand. So it's yes, it's a vision for what we want the city to be. Can we imagine everything? No, we can't. There are things that come up that nobody ever dreamed of. I mean, who would ever have thought that we were going to have things like Uber and Uber Eats and all those kind of things all those years ago? So when, remember when Buffalo Wild Wings had the problem with, oh, where are all these cars going to park when they're lined up for the valet parking even, there are things we have to deal with. We can't imagine every problem ahead of time, but things that the city does have to deal with afterwards. So as for the demographics, I had looked up the demographics on the city's website, and I guess that's another thing that needs to be updated, because I think they had 33% as the number of two language speaking families in White Plains when I looked. But it's really hard to keep a website completely up to date.
And if I could just add to what I think Mary brought up a wonderful point, and I think what's really important to convey here is kind of the relationship from a planning and land use perspective between a comprehensive plan, right, which is adopted by the Common Council. It is a vision document. Obviously, it's developed with a significant amount of community input. It's the community's plan of what we want to be. I like to joke, what do we want to be when we grow up in 30 years or 40 years? But what effectuates that goal or those objectives and those kind of dreams? And that really is the local zoning ordinance. So very often I'll be at public hearings or I'll be at many public meetings around the city, and people will be frustrated at, the plan might not have been updated in the last, say, 5 or 10 years, but say the zoning ordinance might have been, right? So a lot of the recommendations and the really valid recommendations, as David mentioned, for say a lot of the downtown mixed use development, frankly, very visionary thoughts that I know Commissioner Habel, who I'm sure is on the call and held my position, during that time, was really pushing for, was how do we reinvigorate and create a vibrant downtown again? And all those things have bore fruit. But what's important is there's a lot of, even still in the existing plan, really good planning policy. And most of those things have been put into the zoning code. There's a major rewrite of the zoning code on the tail of the last comprehensive plan update. But for example, when I came into the city 5.5, 6 years ago, one of the first things the mayor requested in the Common Council was, how do we re-envision the Westmoreland corridor, just south of the train station? Light industrial district does not allow any uses really beyond that, light industry and some commercial. Wouldn't it be great? We're seeing market forces in parts of Brooklyn and other kind of artsy communities reusing existing historic loft space. The comprehensive plan actually identified a lot of those issues. What never happened, and for a lot of reasons, was the zoning code wasn't updated to say permit that both there and up by the North White Plains station. So in the intervening years, and this happens all the time, the goals of the plan should be specific enough to achieve vision, but general enough to have that flexibility built in, whereby if there is a change in the world, i.e. pandemic shift in the market, or in this case, the thought that people someday would want to live in Dumbo, Brooklyn, or Williamsburg over light manufacturing, and what a crazy idea, right? But we have that baked in, and the story goes, we amended the zoning, the LIM, we called it a light industrial mixed use district. We have a light industrial mixed use 2 district up by the North White Plains station. And in both cases, it's helped to bring the sort of vibrancy of mixed use in a transit oriented location, but all consistent with the plan. But I guess what I'm trying to get, the rubber meets the road with the zoning code. So a lot of times I also get, I hear criticism from the community when I'm speaking about, we're making, zoning changes here and there whenever a developer comes into the city. And what I'm always trying to say is, well, if you read the comprehensive plan, a lot of the goals of what are being proposed in these developments, particularly in our downtown core, are completely in line with the plan. What they might not be 100% in line with is how the CB2, the CB3, the CB4 core zoning districts regulate land use and dimensional regulation. So that's kind of the interplay between the two. And my hope is, as we move through this update, this update to the plan, the tail end of that process, and it will be a multi-year process, will include significant, as I was able to do in the village of Portchester, significant amendments and changes to the zoning code as well, again, to effectuate those goals of the comprehensive plan.
White Plains it's long been a diverse community, desirable to people of different phases of their lives and economic levels. It seems that the residential developments we've been approving over the last few years are largely homogeneous. So can we talk about how the city should approach future planning to balance the competing needs of this diverse community? Who'd like to pick that up?
Well, I think that the plans that get the attention of the one newspaper we have, which doesn't cover everything, is all the big developments downtown, all the luxury housing. But that's not the only type of development that's going on in White Plains. We have the redevelopment of the Brookfield Commons, which I think is fantastic. It's going to be now not just, I believe, I think it's going to be a mixed use development, right, Chris? Yes, shaking his head. That's a really big change in the use of the property there. There are other developments like that, but they don't get so much attention. And we're one of the few communities in Westchester who for a very long time have had affordable housing as a requirement for any new housing. So, you know, so a lot of those things go unseen, unnoticed, but I'll let Chris speak to more, but that's my 2 cents.
And I'll just add that, you know, some of the city's ability or inability to create even additional middle income and moderate income affordable housing relates to policies at the state and even more so federal, which, you know, 20, 30 years ago, there were a lot more way of programs that would finance such housing. Now, most of the time, the way that affordable housing is gotten is by a set aside of a part of a more market rate development. So it's something that the federal government perhaps will step in with some additional going forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I mean, maybe it's time to talk about the affordable housing. I saw a multitude of questions, which were all wonderful in the chat, especially. So as David said, I mean, the city's been a leader. Us in White Plains, I worked at Westchester County, where I was very familiar with all kind of the regional and county-wide local affordable housing ordinances. And White Plains has always been at the forefront. We adopted our first inclusionary zoning ordinance, which means when you develop new multifamily housing in our downtown, or frankly, anywhere now with the new amendments we made in 2019, multifamily of 10 units or more, you do have to provide a percentage of those for affordable at folks that earn 60 to 80% of the Westchester County area median income. But without getting too into the weeds, what's important there is that you know, we've seen a massive production, obviously, even recently in those units. And those are units that we, as a city, and within my department, the City of White Plains Planning Department, manage, meaning we work with the building managers to make sure those 161 rental units and, you know, the 18 properties around the city are, you know, maintained and certified for affordable requirements. We have long lists of people that come to my office daily and are on waiting lists to get into some of these units. But that's only a small part of the affordable housing stock in the city. So a recent study, when we conducted yet another planning document, which you can find on the planning website, the analysis of impediments to fair housing, which is required by HUD for anybody that gets federal dollars, CDBG money. We found many things. And one thing we found is that over 5,000 units are in some way in the city subsidized, whether it's by federal or state sources. So our affordable rental program, which is at 160 units, once these cranes go down and these buildings you're seeing currently being built, the number, we have 1,500 units being developed. We're getting another 120 units out of that. So we'll have 280 in our program, meaning the city managed program. But that's just a fraction of what is, you know, a very robust affordable housing stock citywide. So we're always, you know, I'm always careful to couch, you know, this affordability crisis we have on the Eastern Seaboard and what we're doing. And it's more than just the inclusionary zoning. There's many options. So it's never enough. And I think if I could just hit the final thing here is this recent ordinance that the mayor and the Common Council adopted in 2019 was incredibly progressive in 2 ways. One is that it raised that set aside, meaning what the developers have to provide as affordable, up, right? So it used to be 6 and 10%, depending on the AMI level, basically the affordability level you were serving. It went respectively to 8% and 12%, which again puts us at the forefront of the county. We also identified a need to go deeper with the affordability. And what I mean by that is serving folks at the 50% of area median income. So we effectively put that in the law. And also we established for the first time a payment in lieu of provision of those units. Now, it's very challenging to buy out of your entire set aside, but we used a lot of analysis to make sure, and it's frankly been working wonderfully, where these larger projects are providing both units, inclusionary units within the development, but also have the ability in some capacity to pay the city. We have a fund for the furtherance of fair and affordable housing, to pay money for the council to decide, do we want to provide down payment assistance? Do we want to partner with nonprofits? Do we want to find a way as a city to use the incredible amount of resources it takes to incentivize below market units in an incredibly hot real estate market? And that's what we've done. And we're seeing the fruits of that now with these payments coming to the city. So stay tuned. There's a lot of exciting things coming, and we're trying to get at this very challenging issue that's pervasive on the Eastern Seaboard.
You know, just to go again into some history, and Chris, maybe you can say whether or not this how many cities still doing, but earlier on in the city CDBG program, a good amount of money was put into rehabilitation of some of the older, smaller buildings, multifamily residential buildings in places like Mitchell Place and other places in and around downtown, which helped maintain moderate income housing stock in good condition in the city. So that was another way that the city historically has helped in that area.
Thank you, Dave.
There's other, if I could, I mean, such an important issue. Like for example, we have a senior citizen rent increase exemption that the city offers. So, you know, if you're a senior citizen and you're in a certain AMI, you don't have rent increase over time. So there's abatements back to the landlords. You know, we have a significant amount of the ETPA, Emergency Tenant Protection Act. We have over 2,600 stabilized units in the city. So there's whole sorts and hosts of ways that housing is subsidized, but it's never enough and it never will be. So we are thinking about this issue nearly daily.
Thank you,
I want
Chris.
to add to that, that the community development grants are fantastic. Even I had a next door neighbor whose property was really going down the tubes, and I was able to let them know about the community development grants, and they were able to get a new roof, new siding, etc., to really spruce up their house to prevent it from becoming unlivable, because once the roof starts leaking, you're really in trouble. It's really a fantastic program.
And I believe the Deputy Commissioner of Planning, Judy Mezzi, is on this call, and she manages the community development program for the city. And I encourage anybody that, you know, housing and rehabilitation issues, we have, as long as you qualify from an income perspective, we do have the federal funds to help. So we like to go around touting that successful program.
I would like to go back. I would like to go to one important demographic, the seniors here, which I'm part of, but ongoing. Mary and David, we've had several questions that dealt specifically with our senior population, which apparently makes up 17% of the city's population, over 65. Several people asked about how we could address the needs of this group. And at present, we have a senior center at the downtown Armory. How can we provide an expansion of locations for senior activity and other needs of our seniors?
I saw that question and I thought it was a very valid one, and I'm sure it's right up the alley of things we should be considering in the comprehensive plan. I'm sure that the city will be able to identify another property, someplace that has better parking. I've been to the Armory, and not when I was a senior, not when I became before I became a senior citizen, I should say, to use some of the programs they have there in the evening. And the evening, it was fairly easy to find parking on the street, but there was a lot down the block, and I was able to walk down the block. But that's a very valid point. As you get older, you don't want to walk so far, and it should be more accessible. So I think it would be nice to have yet another location for senior activities.
Just in thinking that not specifically about the center, but thinking about, again, changes we've seen over recent years, just going ticking off on my hand, senior and assisted living and independent living developments that have all been in recent years, the Kensington, the Bristol, the Ambassador, which is, you know, down south, potentially on the Good Counsel site, from what I read in the papers, under construction across from Bloomingdale's. None of those existed, you know, I don't know, even 20 or 30 years ago. So there has been a lot of development in that area. And I see a number of my colleagues and friends on this call who have been people who lived in single family houses in White Plains. We've all moved into multifamily housing in White Plains because we wanted to stay here. And yet I will tell you that the options, even on the market rate side, were somewhat limited in terms of things that are adaptable for seniors. So there's hopefully will be more of that. And it's certainly one of the major demographic trends, not only in the city, but, you know, nationally, in terms of an aging population that has impacted and will continue to impact what gets built.
When I moved from my old home in the 03 zip code, I wanted to keep a house that had a bedroom on the first floor as I got older. And as I'm about to get bunion surgery, I'm very glad to have a bedroom on the first floor. So I have to tell you that as being on the planning board for all those years, I knew that there were a limited number of houses like this with a bedroom on the first floor. And I'm hoping that maybe developers will begin to realize that there is a demand for a certain portion of your life for a bedroom on the first floor. And I live in a block where there are several senior citizens who moved away to be with the number one concern is who's going to help take care of me. I need to be near my son or my daughter if I have such a thing, or some other close relative. So I won't answer everybody's question. We have a neighbor who moved to a continuum of care facility, which I don't think we have any of those in White Plains. And I'm reluctantly signed up to move into one when I'm 80, because that's what my husband insisted. But we have a place to go when we're 80, and we're on that waiting list because it's a long one. You know, unless we wanted to move into a tall building with an elevator, you know, those things are things that you have to plan for. And everybody has to make their own individual decision about that. You know, I definitely wanted to stay in White Plains, but if a continuum of care, long continuum of care facility moves to White Plains, I would certainly consider it.
And what if I could add to that too, those are perfect answers, because to me, it's all about diversity of housing choice and housing product. And to David's point, we are seeing things like, for example, at the Good Counsel site, you know, there's a proposal there, as everybody I'm sure is aware. And one of the components is for a significant amount, 232 units of independent senior living, which in that continuum of care model is going to be attached to an assisted living facility. So the idea being, again, if it's a couple or one person wants to age in place, as we say, you can choose to live in a facility like that is kind of shared and common amenities in a more of a pastoral landscape, if you will, than maybe in the heart of downtown. So we're seeing the Waterstone rise across from Bloomingdale's on Bloomingdale Road. That's for folks, they're marketing to people in their 80s. But again, the meal plans included, sort of a different continuum of care. But even beyond what we define as age restricted per zoning code and per building code, we're starting to see, for example, what's being constructed, we call it the flats out at 1133 Westchester Avenue, the adaptive reuse, or in that case, actually just the reuse in some way of a large existing office park, right? A parcel that's 75 acres on Westchester Avenue. And we're seeing kind of housing product, 300 units, kind of larger rental units than you would find in the core of the downtown, clearly with different amenity package, sort of trying to attract perhaps more of the empty nester, folks that want to stay in White Plains, downsize, right, but still be kind of part of the community. So in every way, whether it's the LIM, you know, mixed use zoning next to the train station, that kind of housing product, it does two things, right? It provides options for everybody on this call that wants to remain in White Plains, right, or anybody moving to the city to have options. And the other thing it does, it brings affordability with a small a, because the more production of units, particularly in the core, on average, right, the market forces will dictate a lower rent for, on a per square foot basis. So, we talk about density sometimes in the core of our downtown, and I think we don't add enough of the educational component and as a planner to explain what the kind of tertiary and secondary benefits are, or secondary and tertiary. We're a city of a living organism. So what happens at Westchester Avenue affects what happens at the LIM, happens, impacts what happens in the core of our downtown. So I'm always trying to push, I'm never myopic on these issues because I frankly talk to every community and everybody's got different needs and concerns. So we're all connected. And there's a reason why developers are seeing a market, because frankly, there is a market for this range of housing citywide.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you all. On Mary's note, I wanted to just mention that my husband and I felt truly blessed to find Brook Hills, which did have and do have master bedrooms on the first floor, thank God. So I go to your point very specifically. I wanted to check a number of neighborhood associations have basically been advocating to be part of the planning process. Do you see that happening, and how do you think they could be included in the process? Chris?
Well, absolutely. It's the community's plan. So without it, yeah, I mean, I think I saw one of the questions from one of the councilmen about the process and how my understanding, and I have all the documents in the bookshelf behind me, which I've all reviewed over the years, is that in 1997, I know Mary can speak and David better than I, about sort of the robust kind of ad hoc committees, or I would say committees that talked about different elements of the plan. 2006 update, maybe not as big, but the approach clearly in this first process is to engage the community and start the community outreach. And I had presented to the Council of Neighborhood Associations, I guess last week, and I wanted to set expectations in the sense that this is clearly going to be a multi-year process. So in the first 5 months, the scope of this update is to really, again, engage as many folks as possible. So I know there's folks in the Rosedale neighborhood I'm speaking to, and North Street, Gedney, all of them. Absolutely. I mean, this is the people's plan, and this is something that gets adopted as a common council as the vision. So, I'm seeing the chats here. I'm reading through them. I was going to respond while I'm talking, which is challenging, but in no way, when I see the way transparent, I cringe because, I'm always encouraging people to go to the planning department's website, and I would challenge anybody to find a more transparent in terms of, we put everybody's documents up, which the architects don't love. We do a lot of stuff here. We have a planning hub that's all done in-house. So anytime you want information of what's before the council, planning board, you can certainly sign up on our website. But there's a lot of transparency, and absolutely this would be, I mean, it's the people's plan. So that's my long way of saying yes. Everybody will be involved that wants to be.
But what are the planning thoughts for changing retail landscape? So many stores are empty. Your thoughts on that?
Somebody else, David, you want to?
As I said, that's a fascinating question. It's one that I know planners and all the places I work have been wrestling with, and it's changed in over the decades. When, as I talked about before, we went from the downtown, we went to the malls. I was involved early in my career with a job where I was in a community. I was hired to help turn the downtown street into a mall, because the idea was that downtowns should try to look like malls. Well, that didn't work. In recent years, you've had a trend where malls are trying to now look like downtowns. So, we have a whole lot of trends. We went from the standalone department stores to the shopping malls, to the enclosed malls, to the big box stores out on the highways. It keeps evolving. And now certainly e-commerce has taken a big chunk out of that. And I don't know that anybody has quite figured out where that's going to end up. Certainly this last year has accelerated that process. Some of us, like me, who didn't used to buy much online, has find myself buying more online. On the other hand, people are expressing the interest in having more of that old downtown feel, and going back to the independent stores, the independent bookstores and all. Where that's going is a heck of a question, and I'm not sure anybody has the answer yet.
Well, I would, or go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I was just going to add that I remembered reading recently that retail sales have gone up in the last month.
Right.
People are shopping for new clothes finally, and now that many people have been vaccinated, they're feeling freer to go out shopping again. And I am not a shopper. I'm happy to wear the same clothes I wore 10 years ago, and I've never been known to be a fashionista, but I don't care. But I have friends who, shop. They call it shopping therapy. They love to go shop. They can't imagine going to the south of France without going to a store. And that's not me, but it is several of my friends, and I'm sure that it will recover to some extent. Sure, I really think e-commerce, now that we've all gotten to see how easy it is going to attract more of us, but I still don't want to give my money to Amazon if I can avoid it.
I guess that's a tough question. I hear it all the time. And I guess I would kind of step back and say, we're doing a lot better than most. One of the kind of what I do a lot in my position is I'll talk to my counterparts in Stamford and New Rochelle and, my friends in Mamaroneck and Larchmont. And what you realize is that, I hear a lot of folks really concerned about, say, Mamaroneck Avenue and vacancies. And, it's a national trend. And we're doing better than most. Now, we obviously have the Galleria Mall and the old, White Plains Mall and other structures that clearly are ripe for redevelopment and, have been reimagined through the planning process and zoning to kind of look to what is the future of retail. So yes, the pandemic, accelerated, as David, to use what David noted, accelerated this trend, kind of the proverbial nail in the coffin of brick and mortar retail. But I think the caveat there is that, that trend was happening just like the adaptive reuse of a lot of the office product that was built in the city in the 80s. So you're seeing City Square, down by the train station. You're seeing a lot of the urban renewal maps I have framed behind me from the Central Renewal Plan from 1970 envisioned multiple million square feet of office, clearly, and elevated walkways connecting them all like the Jetsons. But, all revolutionary planning for the time, it didn't come to fruition. And so what happens to the space that was developed? So we're seeing it at 1 Water Street across from the Transit District Garage, obsolete office building approved for 300 residential units. So all that stuff was happening. The pandemic in some ways, I think, has accelerated it. But the one thing, just to kind of put a cap on this, is that, I read a lot in the last year in every source of media about the death of the downtown and, kind of what's old is new again. And, the 1970s, right? Like New York, due to New York drop dead kind of thing. Like we as a city and we as a region are still the economic engine of the United States. The city of White Plains, in my opinion, is the capital, a strong center economically in Westchester. We have a daytime office population. We have the county. We have everything that we need to be successful moving forward. And while the new landscape in the coming decade is not going to be the Buster Brown shoe store on Mamaroneck Avenue, where I used to get my shoes, it perhaps will be experiential retail in a reimagined Galleria space, Galleria City, with maybe hotel and outdoor restaurants and the sort of thing where, as Mary said, we all don't want to shop on Amazon, but it's so convenient, it's hard not to. But there are reasons we need to convene and why the density of cities post-COVID with, the grace of God with this vaccine, that we will be able to get back to some semblance of what downtowns have. And frankly, the downtown is the engine and it benefits everybody in the city. And we got that benefit better than anybody else in Westchester. So to the extent that taxes can be kept low for the single family homeowner, it's all based on what we're doing here, where I'm sitting here on Hamilton Avenue. And we will come back and we will find solutions so the city can grow and be a leader in the region like we've always been. So I'm very bullish and, we're not dead yet. And retail will exist in a service-based economy and for some of these buildings, but not in the way it was when we were growing up.
David?
Just if I just make a short comment,
Yes.
in terms of how the trends go, the site that's being developed for independent senior housing on Bloomingdale Road, a number of years ago had been approved for a retail development, which never got built. So, that was a big proposal, went through a lot of views, got approved, I believe, Mary, and then never got built and switched to a senior housing development. So it just showed how market demands.
I'd like to address green space. Is there anywhere left in the city that we have green space to use?
I mean, certainly, I mean, I guess it's a different discussion if we're talking about again, the core of our downtown or the core area, if you will, versus obviously the outer neighborhoods as defined in the comprehensive plan. But
Mhm.
I'll just speak to what was exciting a few years ago. The mayor and common council adopted a parkland legislation. So under New York state law, whenever you're proposing multifamily development in a municipality, that municipality, so long as they've done a thorough analysis of the existing recreational resources, which we did here in the planning department, and so long as you can make the case that the increase generated from these new buildings based on certain multipliers will have kind of an undue impact on those existing resources, you have the ability as a common council to levy a parkland fee if, in fact, the project does not include open space at grade, basically. So again, what you're seeing in New York City with some of those fountain parks and all that stuff, was all part of zoning legislation in New York. So the city took the initiative, us, the city, right? And what's happened over the last, I guess that was adopted probably 4 to 5 years ago. Most of the projects you've seen in the downtown have done two things. They've tried to meet the spirit of that law, meaning, for example, if you look at the Mitchell going up on Post Road, Mitchell Place, Mamaroneck Avenue currently, not only is there going to be a significant 8,000 square foot community publicly accessible park, one parcel in off Mitchell Place. If you go by there, you can kind of see it now, which is going to be wonderful, right? So anybody in the community can use that park, professionally landscaped by landscape designers with the same hours of operation of any city park. But because they didn't meet the full impact, if you will, of the additional residents from that development, they got a partial credit on the recreation fee. So that was a great example of the city benefiting from this new law. So not only is there an 8,000 foot park that we can all enjoy, but there's somewhere in the neighborhood of an $850,000 payment to a specific city fund that's been established for the future use to basically dedicate parkland, acquire land citywide. So that's been happening on multiple projects, including what just got approved by the Common Council last meeting at the Gateway 2 project. There was a significant open space as well as a fund. So the city is establishing that fund, and we do have an open space plan. And there's certainly opportunities I know we've been thinking about of where we should be allocating such resources.
If I could, and this is actually almost more of a question for me, when we did the comprehensive plan back in the 90s, before that, the main focus of open space discussions was the New York Hospital. And for those folks who were around then, there were multiple proposals for development on that site. There was a lot of citizen input to try to preserve sections or large portions of that site. Nothing ever got built there, as far as I know, and I'm not really aware what the status of that is. And I don't know if maybe Chris, if you can clarify if there's anything active in terms of thinking, but that's something actually Mary and I we were talking about the other day because we live nearby, and it's a resource that we don't really get to use other than to kind of walk past it. So is there a current status? Have there been any discussions?
Not recently, but I think, David, you bring up a great point relative to what the comprehensive plan process needs to include. We've always talked about, and again, my predecessors, Sue and others, did a lot of planning here. So, for example, when 1133 Westchester came before the council for what's being constructed there, that reuse of that office park, part of what was in the open space plan and in the overlay zoning that was based a lot on this comprehensive plan vision for open space accessibility was providing bike infrastructure, pedestrian pathways to connect to, say, the neighborhood schools and the like. So a lot of what the plan has currently, when I say the bones are good, are all very valid planning reasons and rationale behind looking at these large privately owned open spaces. I know the comprehensive plan didn't contemplate at that time the reuse or the repurposing of Good Counsel. Great example. What was approved as part of that master plan and the rezoning of that campus, and which everybody will be seeing in a few short months with a site plan, is completely in line with the comprehensive plan, be it, the preservation of that vista on North Broadway. But as it relates to kind of the Tibbetsbrook corridor and maintaining the historical vista and the open space connections to the neighborhood. So there's very specific recommendations, both in the open space plan the city has and the existing comprehensive plan of how do we deal with these large open spaces, particularly in the south end of the city, which we know in some way may change in the future. I mean, everybody's familiar with the FASNY site. Obviously there are proposals there over time for both open space recreation, even in the latest approved site plan for significant open space to be preserved in conjunction with that site plan approval to provide access to North Street, for example, to the high school. So huge thing that I think will be considered, needs to be considered as we try to envision what's going to happen to one other thing I'll throw out there. I think about this all the time, the North Street corridor. There's a lot of institutions out on North Street, religious and otherwise, that have some large lots, and the existing zoning is one thing. The comp plan talks about that corridor. But we need to have a robust discussion as a community, as a city, about what is the future, because it's not going to look the same in 15 years, just by virtue of market forces. So that's another opportunity to engage on sort of open space connectivity down there. So absolutely, David, in every way.
I want to give credit to Rod Johnson, who has been our environmental officer for years. And one of the things that whenever a small subdivision or whatever would be before the planning board, he would look for ways to preserve a sliver of property at the back of those properties, so that he envisioned a linear park throughout White Plains. And that was really visionary, because some of those things have gotten longer and more connected. I recently went walking on the path that we must have approved when 1133 got built. There's a nice path behind that property where I think it was meant that the workers could go on their lunch hour. And I got to go walking there on Easter Sunday when every place else was going to be packed. It was a good place to go walking. There's more in that comprehensive plan from the old one than meets the eye at first.
Pardon me, we had a question of what exactly is the New York Hospital land?
It is the property behind Bloomingdale Road. So kind of across from the Whole Foods, right? From that development, you see the access when you get down Maple, it's across that. It's an incredibly large piece of property.
It goes all the way down to Bryant.
Yeah.
And probably Burke might have been at one point part of it. I'm not positive.
Bloomingdale's was.
Bloomingdale's was, and there used to be a way to get under Bryant Avenue from one to the other. I'm not sure if that's closed off now. I think it is. Last time I was down there, it was more than a year ago, and it was closed off at that time.
It's a large property with some historic buildings and historic landscapes, and we know what its future is.
Yeah, it's still in use.
But it's been very quiet. Again, 25 years ago, it was the hot button issue in the city, and it went away.
Right.
And just to that point, getting back to this comprehensive plan discussion. So if you look back at sort of what the comprehensive plan referenced for the Good Counsel property, it didn't anticipate obviously any change to the sisters leaving and the like, but it did say in the case that it did change or it turned over that I think it referenced think tank institutions and other uses, the adaptive reuse, if you will, of those buildings. Now, great example of a vision in a plan where, maybe in the 2000s it might have been financially viable, or it was a different time, right? So there's a lot of references like that as kind of a caveat when we plan for the future. Absolutely, the goal is to have a consensus around vision for what we want to see. But I want to tie everybody back to sort of the initial discussion of kind of the zoning, right? Because the zoning wouldn't have permitted that. So there needs to be that kind of hand in glove kind of connection. And also understanding that, as Mary said to start the discussion, these are dynamic documents, and inherently there's going to be changes that we didn't anticipate. So whether it's we can say we want to have a convention center in downtown. We can, there's all these things we can say, but the market will dictate unless the government itself is going to intervene and determine that kind of in a public-private way. But there's a lot of things that do come out of the planning process that are very great from a charrette perspective, that both has to be viable when the zoning gets changed, and obviously something that when these facilities do turn over, they lend themselves to, right? Because part of the challenge of some of these older facilities is that there's very little you can do by way of fire code to reuse them in any economically viable way. So I think there's that, it's the vision there, but then having sort of that grounding of what can really be possible moving forward.
I would like to leave with the closing question. How can more citizens of White Plains be involved in planning for the future, and to whom should they speak to?
Well, I'd like to start. I think that it's important for people who are interested in what's going on to try to stay informed. We can no longer rely on our local newspaper to do that. Some of us remember when White Plains had its own newspaper, and there are other news sources out there like John Bailey's. I saw he was going to be on this Zoom, and the Examiner, but that little paper, which is very valuable. There are information there that you don't get anywhere else. But more importantly, go to the City of White Plains website. On the bottom of one of the pages, there's something that says, stay notified. Click on that and you can get notified whenever the Common Council or any other agency puts out an agenda. So look, I was on the planning board for years, and every once in a while there's something that's before the planning board that's I find very interesting. I don't spend my days anymore reading all of the plans and what's going to be up on the agenda, but I do usually peruse it. I'm just curious, and I do the same thing with the Common Council agenda, and once in a while some of the others. And you can get copies of the agenda. You can get copies, find out what's happened after things have been decided. There's even a way to view the meetings. So you can be in Florida and you can watch the Common Council meeting or the planning board meeting or whatever interests you. So if you see something on an agenda that's in your neighborhood or that's, just grabs your interest and you want to know more, then read that agenda. The Common Council has all the background info that's usually available. So you get to read all the nitty-gritty documents like I used to do from all the different departments. I can tell you it's not a lot of fun, but it's important. You can stay involved. Get involved also with your neighborhood association. If you don't like your neighborhood association, well, get involved and be a new person on that neighborhood association. But don't just leave it to the neighborhood association. You can personally get involved. Okay, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for that plug. We appreciate it.
Well, yeah, everything Mary said and everything's available. And obviously, shoot an email if you have any concerns or questions, that's what we're here for. So we're available.
That's wonderful. Thank you so very much for being with us this evening. We've covered all the questions, which is really wonderful to hear. And thank you, Mary, David, Chris. You've enlightened all of us, and we're very grateful. And I look forward to seeing you once again soon. Okay. Thank you, everyone.